Today we are meeting with Nima Nawwab, a Saudian poet, writer, and social activist. So we were going to talk about role of women in Islam and especially how this role changed after the so-called Arab Spring. Welcome, Nima.
Thank you.
The first question I wanted to ask you is what is your view on the position of women in Islam and whether it was implemented during the whole history of the Muslim Ummah and how you see it in Saudi Arabia as well?
Okay, that's three parts, so I'll answer each separately. Islam has always been for women and very pro-women. It's a very pro-women faith. The implementation of the different legislations and the rules that govern our lives and are ordained by the One, regardless of them being men or women, have been there for centuries, of course. The implementation of those rules, especially with regards to women, was taking place during the early years during the Prophet ﷺ's life and during the lives of his companions and the caliphs. Later on with time, tribalism resurged in the Arabian Peninsula again. So tradition and culture superseded religion in many ways and has taken over in terms of women's rights.
So, do you see any advancement in the position of women since the start of the Arab Spring, the so-called phenomenon of Arab Spring, or you feel that women's rights instead regressed in Islamic countries, and Saudi Arabia particularly?
First of all, the Arab Spring, I have a big contention with the phrase. I've always had one because it's not our own phrase. It started in the West and it picked up. And it's not been a spring because we've had a lot of insurgencies, we've had death, we have massacres, wars. So it's not really spring, it's a very harsh winter. With regards to women's rights across the Islamic world, they have fluctuated throughout this last period in different countries based on movements in the countries themselves. In Tunisia, in Morocco, in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, in the Gulf countries. Each has its own case. Each has its ups and downs in a way. So with regards to, for example, Egypt, we've seen how the Islamic movement there has taken over and women are now complaining about certain things. With regards to Tunisia, things have moved forward for women's rights. With regards to Saudi Arabia, we've had changes, but I don't relate them to the Arab Spring. We've had changes that we've been working on for the last 15 years. For example, voting for municipal elections, voting in Shura Council, entering the Shura Council, some civil rights for women that we've been campaigning for and working towards implementing for many, many years have been put in effect, but not really related to the Arab Spring per se.
Were there any changes in the perception of the Institute of Male Guardianship in Saudi Arabia since then? And how are the attitudes in the kingdom now? Meaning that are there unanimous consent on that the institute should last, or there are some voices of dissent?
With regards to the guardianship issue, which is really the root cause of many, many of our issues, such as child marriages, such as travel, medical care, the right of women for divorce, the right to choose her own husband and partner, the matter has been on a standstill for many, many years. We've talked about it, but we really need to address it further, and it's being addressed currently. And this last month, we've had something about it on the Shura Council as a discussion point, basically. But we need its resolution, because if it is resolved, then a lot of other issues will be resolved as well.
And how about the recent changes about giving women the right to vote for municipal councils, and what and all you think about the voting rules in the kingdom?
Well, it's very interesting because women's voices are usually not heard in many Muslim countries usually, and what's happened in Saudi Arabia, for example, not just a voice, but I'll read you a poem in a minute about voting. It came up in terms of women's voices, it came up in terms of voting, and I related it to the idea of how women are perceived in the society and what is accepted traditionally was not. Okay, with this poem there are actually two Arabic words, and I usually don't put Arabic words or phrases in poems, but this one is done intentionally, and I'll explain these two before I start reading. So one of the words is awra, which means not to be sensed or seen, and this crosses faiths in the Arab world. Awra is something you can't, it's shameful, for example. And then the other one is the word ayb, which goes against tradition and against culture and is unaccepted. So, they waged a silent give and take when decades of voices were not to be heard, their very names not uttered. Awra is the voice, ayb is the name. And that now the tide surges as new blossoms join older rooted shading trees, as the forest teems with new living cells, brimming with life in the raindrops, falling, falling, dripping, dripping, just before the miraculous double rainbows of offered new horizons, of a new, untapped, untrod arena, as the voices are for once given the right to be heard, given the right to vote, given the right to enter the folds of humanity. So when you think about, for example, in Saudi Arabia, we have segregation, we have a lot of tradition that overrides our very religion. And when even the name of a woman is not heard, when you say the name of a woman is not heard, is, for example, if your name is Aisha, you're not called Aisha, you're called by the daughter of so-and-so or the mother of so-and-so. So even your name is not heard. So to be given the right to vote was a major concern for women. And it is a big step, and we still have a long, long way to go in terms of other steps, for example.
So what exactly is the perception of this equality, gender equality in Saudi Arabia now? How it should be implemented, given women right to vote, right to drive, to eliminate the institute of male guardianship? What else should be done? And is there something that already has been done?
A lot has been done. We deal with different factors. First of all, we need to work as teams to address issues that touch our daily lives. So when you think in terms of taking it case by case, what are the rights of widows? What are the rights of divorced women? What are the rights of a daughter, for example? Right now, any young girl who needs to go to college has to have written permission by her guardian. And the guardian doesn't not necessarily have to be a father. It can be someone who is younger, her brother who is younger than her, if her father's not alive, for example, or an uncle. And what if a woman doesn't have any male relatives? That does happen, and it is a problem. Then who does she go to? She needs to travel. She needs to undergo surgery, basically. So all of these are issues that we deal with on a daily basis that need to be addressed. We still have, as I mentioned earlier, a long way to go where we reach some of these rights. We need a bit more, and we're more aware. There is an awareness of the need to and what to address, basically. We also have interesting cases that come up from time to time in terms of new cases that have never been done before. For example, forced divorce. This is something that was relatively quite new a few years ago, and how to deal with that. So it's not just the old cases that have been there for a long time and old issues that are stagnating, but also new issues that crop up from time to time. And how to deal with them is unique. Case by case is very unique. Because each one is a different problem. Each one needs its own solution. And the solutions are many and varied. But the key is really work together as teams. Women need to work together more and more as teams to address these issues on different levels, especially with civil needs and civil rights.
Are there any men supporting women's cause?
Yes, we have quite a few men who are supporting. Some of them are in the Shura Council, some of them are writers and advocates, some are television personalities. So it's through different means, and they're trying their best, really. They're helping.
So is the society, you can say, psychologically ready to this gender equality? How
I don't think it's gender
people's
equality. I think
attitudes?
it's just first of all, getting your rights, first of all, because right now we're still way below the normal in terms of rights. Okay, and the yardstick is not other countries. The yardstick is our own society and what it accepts. So the society's acceptance overrides the acceptance by others, in our view, in many people's views. Once the society accepts something as the norm, then we can move forward, then we'll have some change. Because our laws do help when they get implemented, and that's another factor. So it's the society and then implementation of a law. What's the use of a law if it's there and it's made and then it doesn't get implemented? We need that also to be done.
So your tools, which tools you work with? Your tool is art mostly. Could you please tell us more about it? And do you see any limits while working on your pieces or while teaching, while giving talks? What are those limits in your work you see?
The tools are art. Yeah, you're right. The tools are my art through writing, photography, lecturing, working with youth, through activism, and through mentoring youth, actually, because I think our youth are key in terms of spreading the awareness for the future generation, and they are the key, they're actual key to our future. And they are the ones who are going to implement these changes and live with them even more than we will. So working through youth and working through art are two of the tools that I'm using currently. And the limits are expanding sometimes, depending on what the issue is. So issue by issue, it depends on the issue. Once again, okay, I want to, for example, when you talk about rights and we talk about matters that deal with this society, and for me it's not women's rights per se, it's everybody's rights. I'm a humanitarian. I care about men, women, and youth, and of course children. So some of the issues, for example, we have the destruction of historical sites in the holy cities, in Mecca and Medina. So how do you do that? How do you work on something like that? You have forced divorce, how do you work on that? And it can be done through different ways, basically. Each you find a solution to in a different way, hopefully.
And the last question, possibly, as far as we are welcoming you at the Islamic Renaissance Front, could you please tell me how do you see the place of Islam in this recent process of change? What are the attitudes towards Islam? How people see Islam as an impediment towards some secular state or towards freedom, or as a tool to implement their needs and wants and the way of life they are striving to?
I think we shouldn't use Islam as a tool in that sense. If you're talking about rights, these rights have been mandated already by Islam. It's our problem that we're not implementing them. Man has overridden the implementation of the rules that are set 1,400 years ago. So we're past that right now. So to use Islam and to hijack the religion, quite often nowadays people are hijacking religion to use it for their own political agenda and politicizing our religion, and also encouraging divisions within the faith is actually not the way to address when you talk about rights, basically, because those rights were already ordained by Islam. So if we go back to the core of the religion, it's there. Islam is never an impediment, it's never a barrier.
And people carry this understanding with themselves that these rights were given by Islam, but they were just, as you mentioned, hijacked. So there is this understanding is there.
We've regressed. We've actually regressed. There was a lot more openness, a lot more giving of rights, a lot more justice in the early days of Islam. And that's been documented quite often. It's the golden era during those days, and we've regressed a lot.
So we can say that this understanding also regressed among people.
It depends on the person. It depends on how much you study history and go back into how it was implemented in the beginning and what are our rights. I mean, just thinking about what are our rights that are implemented. Are we aware of their rights? Do women know their rights? Do men know their rights according to Islam? That's the first step. That's the basic structure and the basic foundation is these are your rights as a human being. On dealing with each other, on dealing with the environment, on how to conduct yourself, on morals, on values. They're all there. They're in our religion. But are we implementing them? Is man taking charge? Man has left that behind in many ways. And we need to go back. And the perception of Islam within Islam itself by Muslims is also changing constantly. And we shouldn't put our own connotation on what we think is the right. There's nothing called right Islam. There's the Sunnah. There's a Quran, there's a Sunnah, and that's our major resource. These two are our major resources. That's the core of our religion.
So we are staying with a hope in art and education as means to widen understanding and to raise awareness.
Exactly. Awareness is the key, for sure. As many times as you say, is the key, it is the key, basically. Awareness, and understanding of the history, because we're not living on an island in time. We're part of history, and it's all linked together. It's linked to history, it's linked to our society, it's linked to the age that we're living in, the time we're living in, and to the countries around us. We are now in a very crucial time, and through history we learned that through the centuries, there's been a lot of turmoil, it's not just our time. And what did people do during those times of turmoil? What are we doing now?
We should ask ourselves.
We need to question ourselves. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you, Nema.
Thank you.